Oh, my loves, how are you? Today we're going to do a deeper freestyle. So, whatever you see on the title is going to be a synapse of what came through for today's messages. I don't know about you, but I've definitely still been deep in a huge process of integrating these most recent shifts over the last few weeks. I took a few days. I just had like three things pop up on my computer, so I apologize for that. It took a few days to really give myself space with that. And a lot has been coming through. I know we were touching in on a lot of that inner child stuff, and it hit a little bit deeper about something that I want to share with you that's very important to our own internal union and our capacity to communicate within these divine counterpart twin flame connections. And it really goes into, yes, our inner child, but very importantly, it really drops into our DNA, our ancestry, and our mother and our father. Okay. And looking at it, that the foundation of our genetic mother and father obviously is the energy that created us as an individual. Okay. So they're 50%, you are made up of about 50% of each of their genetic material. And that's informing your cells and your physical makeup, even your emotional responses and your spiritual connection to some degree in the physical world, but also how your parents interacted with one another, what they felt about one another, how they handled conflict with one another, maybe even how your grandparents felt about your mother and your father, right? How they looked at their own child, and then how their perspective of the your parents' relationship was. And all of that information actually was affecting you before you were even born, in a sense, right? Because of the genetic material and the genetic experiences that your mother and father were going through, and how they responded to them, or what were their trauma responses or defense mechanisms and things of that nature. And so there was always some form of energetic communication happening. And you, as their child, took in and experienced that information depending on how close you were with your parents or not. Even if you were adopted and never actually met your parents, say as soon as you were born, you got whisked away and never actually met your birth parents, they still had a huge, tremendous impact on who you are genetically and how your responses are and how you live your life, regardless of who raised you. Okay. Because all of that ancestral information is still present in your system. And the reason I'm bringing this up in connection with the divine counterpart experiences is because of this idea around communication. The twins, the divine counterparts, are in a constant form of energetic communication, correct? And so, whether you're in the same vicinity, whether you're both here incarnated on the planet, whether you're on the other sides of the world, or whether you're 3 blocks away and not speaking to each other in the physical world, regardless of the circumstances, there is always some level of energetic communication taking place. And so it's sort of like this mirror of how you're being informed by your genetic information, but you're also in this form of communication with your divine counterpart. And so the things that you're experiencing from your personal life or from the ancestors that you chose to be born into, that is in constant communication also with your divine counterpart and their genetic ancestral information. And as many of you may have experienced, oftentimes twin flames and divine counterparts have very similar childhoods. There might be a little bit of differences here and there, but oftentimes, once people sort of sit down and look at it, there are a lot of similarities. Now, how each counterpart responds to those similarities, this is usually where things start to shift. So you may find that both of you in some areas have the same exact type of reaction or the same exact ways of coping with your experiences. And then you may also find that you, in other circumstances, had the very, very opposite ways of coping and dealing with things. So one of you may look at things head on and sort of try to problem solve and work through things from an emotional standpoint. And the other one may sort of shut down and avoid the emotional part. One of you may not want to look at the physical world and material world, and the other one is very focused on that. One of you may sort of avoid conflict, and the other one may address conflict. These are just some of the dances, or both of you may find that you're very strong in your communication, right? But it may be in different areas where you communicate your strength, just things of this nature. And what it's really boiling down to for this part of my conversation with you is if you are still noticing that you're not having clear communication with your counterpart, or you're not in clear communication in the physical world, there's a few areas that you may want to look into a little bit deeper. Not to say that you've done something wrong, but just this is an opportunity to look at the mirror. I know a lot of times what we see out and about is like some of those very basic, like, where are you in self betrayal? Where are you chasing? All of those types of things. But this is going to be a little bit different. So, one, it's definitely, like I said, looking at like, how did your parents communicate? Was one of them trying to share what they needed and the other one sort of checked out? Was one of them, saying what they wanted and the other one would shut it down and say no? There's lots of different dynamics that could be happening. Okay. So you might notice things from both sides, like something that your mom was trying to communicate that your dad didn't absorb, or something that your dad was trying to share to get his point across and his perspective, and mom would just shut it down without absorbing it. Some of the times this happens is because if one doesn't feel heard, they get into a defense mechanism and then they shut the other one down. And this can also start to play out in our relationships, or the parents actually do it to the child and then the child perpetuates that. That's another thing. How many times back in the day people would say to kids, be seen, not heard? Children just aren't allowed to share their opinion or their perspective or to ask questions. And many times it was seen as disrespectful. But in truth, a lot of times the children or the child actually has a very useful perspective, and it's just part of that old programming that we're unraveling out of. So looking at this, like, where were you told not to communicate? Where, as a younger adult, teen, or child, did you try to communicate but were not heard? Right? We've even talked about being a little 2, 3, 4 year old, seeing things intuitively and not having anybody to share it with or anyone to hear or listen to what you're saying, and just being blown off. So there's a lot of ways that just right out of the gate, our communication was stifled. Okay. But this goes even deeper when we're getting into the physical body. In some of the ways that your physical body may be telling you that things are not, the communication isn't lining up, is how's the communication within your organs, within your cells, and within your body? How are your hormones functioning? How is your digestion operating? How is your blood circulating? How are your muscles working? Okay. Again, this is also not to judge in any way, shape, or form. This is actually dropping down deeper into the levels of mirrors that we have available to us. If this resonates with you, of course, this is how I operate. This is how I look at things. This is how I take self responsibility. It's not for everybody, of course. But for those of you that like to sort of dive into this detective work of understanding what your energy and your experiences are communicating with you and the opportunities they're providing, these are some of the things that have been very helpful for me. So noticing this whole stream really came about a lot deeper for me because I work with a naturopath and my digestion was still not operating at the higher capacity that I would like it to. I'm improving in a lot of areas, but that area was still struggling a bit. So I've been working with it deeper and really thinking about this and kind of observing all of the other experiences and conversations that have been presenting. And it really sort of took me back to when my parents got divorced and my stomach started hurting then. And in retrospect, I can see it so clearly now. It was a very traumatic experience that was hard for me to digest spiritually, emotionally, energetically. And it started to go deeper into my cells and into my body to where I was actually having a hard time digesting food. But this makes sense because we're talking about the different layers and the different dimensions of who we are as beings, in the micro to the macro, and how we are layered, but each layer of who we are is giving us clues and information about how to harmonize all of those parts of ourselves. So, this is the internal union energies. If our bodies are not optimally functioning, then what can we do to get those up to optimal function, right? Full digestion, full health, full, you know, balance and homeostasis within the body. So we work on that in the body, right? And then we're also looking at it from an emotional perspective. So we're getting the body shored up, working with the digestion, but from a physical, like an emotional standpoint, how are we digesting our emotions? How are we processing them? How are we mastering the information that's being communicated to us? How are we assimilating that information? How are we making it a part of our life? Are we giving our body enough space to digest the information that we're being given so that we can process our emotions? Are we allowing ourselves the space to tap into the spiritual higher power and our spiritual connection to support us and surrendering to that higher support so that we can get the tools that we need to digest the emotions and the experiences we're having? Are we calling that in so that as that energy trickles down to our emotions and our physical experiences, that then if we can process what's happening around us and clear the trauma before it sets in, can we then digest our food and our nutrients so that our organs and our bodies can assimilate everything that they need? This is all such a huge, like, trickle down effect. First, giving our body the nutrients and the support that it needs so that it has the capacity to digest what we're feeding it physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is actually dive into a few cards, a few messages for both the feminines and the masculines when it's coming to this topic. And I would like you, of course, because you're here with me, I know you're working on those internal union energies and thinking about it in terms of your own internal masculine and feminine energies. And of course, your connection with your divine counterpart, but also adding that layer of looking at the mother and the father and how that is a deeper form of your internal feminine and masculine information from a physical standpoint. Okay. We're going to start out with the masculines and see what messages want to come through. And I'm going to pick one from the feminine and let's see how they're communicating together. Okay. So the masculines came through with straddling worlds, wandering between realms, and the divine feminine came through with the divine feminine receptive power. And when I'm looking at this in terms of communicating together, what I'm actually sensing is I'm going to read it from your own perspective as an individual, your internal union, and then I'm going to bring in messages for the counterparts. So, from an internal union's perspective, this part of you that has been learning to receive higher information and to allow yourself to drop into receiving new ways of being, it's also bringing up these parts of you from your masculine side that's showing maybe where you're moving into the new, but you're still dealing with things from the past, like the examples I just gave, where you're asking to embody those higher essences and surrender to the higher power, but you're still processing the emotions. You're still processing the ancestral information. You're still clearing out the old programming and dropping in the new results. You're still finding pockets where you're wanting to strengthen and shore up and heal and detox and mineralize the human form, your physical body. And so this dance is happening where you're bringing in the higher information and then you're processing it in the physical form. Okay. And so then you talk about the divine counterparts. The divine feminines have been working through this process. She is still learning how to do this and drop into her physical vessel and navigate these processes, right? But it feels very strong that the feminines are getting much, much clearer within this, which in the other side of this is allowing the masculines, how this is coming through is they are able to start to unravel out of that old programming where they shut themselves down and dissociated away from the painful experiences. Okay. So an example would be, say there's a set of divine counterparts that went through a parental divorce. Okay. Both of them had a similar experience in their childhood, and one faced it head on and sort of looked at where things could have been better, like has this awareness that it deeply affected them. And the other one sort of like shut down and just started to survive. You also may find that you both did the same things but in different areas. Okay. One of you maybe directly dealt with parts and shut down parts, and the, the dealt with certain things and then shut down other parts. So it's like a recalibration is happening within the connections. As one counterpart gets clearer within a topic, it's also becoming clearer for the other counterpart. And yes, we're talking about the feminines bringing in the higher power, but this also is relative that the masculines are also bringing in the higher power in a different way. They're looking at it there as they're allowing themselves to open up to new perspectives, or if things are happening to push them into seeing new perspectives, or the experiences are sort of opening their eyes, they are also bringing in a new perspective. Each time they learn something and open up to something new, it actually enhances divine feminine's perspective as well. And as divine feminine learns something and integrates it, that in turn feeds the masculine perspective. And it goes into this gorgeous cycle in that you're sort of becoming this ladder for one another, where as you're growing, you're helping one another level up. And regardless of how it looks, regardless of what rung it looks like anybody's on, or which timeline or which dimension, you're both working in tandem with the broader perspective. So it may look like you're on opposite dimensions or opposite ends of the spectrum at times, but that's because you are working in tandem to navigate that broader capacity and to neutralize and harmonize the extremes, my loves. So if you find yourself and your counterpart in very different opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of circumstances, this is because at a soul level, you have chosen to work within that bandwidth to harmonize and neutralize these types of energies. And gain the self mastery that's necessary to not run, freeze, avoid, chase within that bandwidth. This means that you're working within that, again, that what looks like a duality, you're working within it to bring unity to that, to bring neutrality to that. So if it looks like this the space between you is large, that's because the capacity of your soul and what you chose to do to bring forth this together. Sorry, this like download is coming in right now. Like I'm seeing the visions of it. And so I'm processing it in real time in that sense that it's like the farther away it seems, actually, the bigger the purpose. Okay, my loves. So take this process and sort of drop into looking at the themes of your connection. Look at the themes of your communication and what is that communicating to you? Where can you drop into a new perspective? Where can you support your physical body's communication? Where can you support your emotional communication? Your spiritual communication, any of those things that you can work on internally, of course, then you're going to be able to support in these external connections. All right, my loves, I'm going to bring in one final part. I'm going to bring it from the mystical shaman deck. I'm not even sure. I can just feel like more wants to come in with this. Okay, I feel like I got to get two. We got a valence full. Okay, apparently three. Huh? Oh my gosh. I love this. I literally love it. The Gatherer came out, and I was like, well, this is the feminine, but let's see what balances it. And I'm not even joking. We have the Hunter and the Sweat Lodge. So, of course, we have the Hunter and the Gatherer, and the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine coming together. What feels even more significant than this gorgeousness is the sacred Sweat Lodge. And to me, this is immediately bringing me to this still point inside the heart, the still point where the internal masculine and feminine meet in the heart space, that still point where your mother and your father's DNA and essence meet in the center of your heart space, where your connection with your divine counterpart syncs up and meets in your sacred heart space, where your connection to the higher power in the earth meet in your sacred heart space. And whether you go to a physical, real, live sweat lodge, or you go into the sweat lodge of your heart, this feels very much important for you to take some sacred space and time with these messages and allow yourself to contemplate them for yourself. Because what is coming to me is that, yes, I've shared these tidbits, but each one of you has your own unique, gorgeous perspective and truth within your heart. And as you take this time to simply contemplate with whatever was activated or opened within you during this video, allow yourself that sacred space within the sacred sweat lodge energy of allowing yourself to be open to the revelations that want to come from within your own sacred heart space, my loves. This is not something you have to force. This is not something you have to figure out or even project what you think it may be. This is about taking that time alone to just give your heart space to communicate with you everything that it's been wanting to share with you, my love. The answers have always been inside of you. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I'm super excited. This is such a gorgeous, gorgeous message. And for me, it was definitely worth the wait to share it with you from this space. For those of you that may not know, I have my final week of 30-minute sessions available this week. I think there's a few left. I don't normally run 30-minute sessions. Of course, my other sessions are still available as well beyond this week. But if you're interested in that, I'll drop that information in the pinned comment. For those of you with me on Patreon or who would like to join me there, I'm also going to go into a deeper message there over on Patreon at some point today. So, so much love, appreciation, respect, and honor for you and for our connection here on Harmonious Hearts. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon, my loves. Beautiful, beautiful work. Bye.